What's up, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Mafia Podcast, NBA Edition. My name is Jordan Jaika, aka Dr. Fantasy, and as always, I am here with my co host, the Fantasy Caveman. We are wrapping up our free agency draft grades, or free agency draft, whatever, free agency grades. And today we're going to be talking about the Western Conference. What we're going to do is go team by team, going in reverse standing order, talk about some of the players that they added through the draft and free agency, and the players that they also lost. We'll go team by team here. So we're starting with the Golden State Warriors, which is very strange that they were the worst team in the West, but that's where we are right now. So via the draft, second overall pick, they drafted James Wiseman. Also took Nico Mannion in the second round and Justinian Jessup. And then they traded for Kelly Oubre. They signed Brad Wanamaker and Kent Bazemore. And then via free agency, they lost Dragon Bender and waived Kai Bowman. So what do you think of this, Caveman?
Starting off, we both said this one. This was the most logical draft fit out of any pick. Made just not much you can add about it. Just made sense for the Warriors to take Wiseman, and that's what they did. So they didn't mess that up. Nico Mannion's is going to be an interesting fit. Interesting fit. I think Kent Bazemore could, especially with Klay Thompson going down, I think Kent Bazemore could end up playing a bigger role than. I forgot that Bazemore's signing happened before or after the Thompson injury, but either way, and then obviously the big move they made acquiring Kelly Oubre, who you know is one of my favorite guys. I love me some Kelly Oubre, so I think I gave them a B plus. I'm surprised I did not give them put them in the A range, but those are hard to get. So you give them Oubre, especially obviously now that Klay Thompson is out for the year. He's gonna play a big role. I think the Brad Wanamaker signing is very under the radar to play. I think he's gonna get some decent minutes behind Steph Curry. I think for the Warriors next season, I mean, they're gonna go from being the worst team in the West. Even now, losing Klay Thompson is a big loss for them, obviously. But I still think, because they still have Draymond, they have Andrew Wiggins there now. They have James Wiseman. They have Kelly Oubre. They still have a hell of a team. Mm-hmm. So I think they're obviously. I still think they're championship contenders. They're still, even losing Klay Thompson for the year, I still think they're championship contenders. So I do think they're gonna go from being the worst team to they're gonna be. I still think they're gonna be a top maybe 4 or 5 in the Western Conference next season. So they're gonna be a championship contender, and that's what I'd say about that.
Yep, yeah, I would agree that even without Klay Thompson, they'll be in contention. But one of the things that I really like that they've done over the past, I'll say even year, when they acquired Andrew Wiggins, is they're starting to plan, I think, for beyond Steph and Klay a little bit, which I think is promising for them so they can keep the dynasty moving forward. So now as Steph and Klay are getting older, because, I mean, next season, I don't know what they're planning on doing when Klay is back. I mean, they could have Steph, Klay, Wiggins, Oubre, Wiseman. I'm not exactly sure what the long-term Draymond right now.
Apparently they're talking about a Steph Curry extension.
Yeah, so it's very interesting, but I think I really like with Wiseman, Oubre, and Wiggins is they're starting to fill this team with some younger guys that can play at a potential all-star level beyond Steph and Klay's careers. So they're really just trying to replenish and rebuild the dynasty while still being competitive now. So it's possible you may not see this team falter for a very long time, especially if Wiseman plays. I mean, I mentioned that I think he could be Anthony Davis level. I mean, if he ever lives up to Anthony Davis potential, you're just resetting the entire dynasty. So he's going to have every opportunity to succeed. So I like what they've done, not only this offseason, but over the last year to just replenish that farm system, so to speak. So let's go to a team that is unsurprisingly at the bottom here. The Minnesota Timberwolves are next. They drafted Anthony Edwards first overall, as well as Jaden McDaniels, which I thought was actually a really under the radar pick for them. They traded for Ricky Rubio. They signed Juancho Hernan-Gomez, and then they lost James Johnson via trade, and then in free agency, Alan Crabb, Keelan Martin, Jordan McLaughlin, and Evan Turner. So what do you think about this offseason?
Yeah, very interesting. Starting off with the draft, they obviously the number 1 overall pick and went Edwards. Me and you kind of were going back and forth on this leading up to the draft. Me personally, I wanted them to take LaMelo, but I don't think they went wrong with Anthony Edwards by any means. They really, and that was kind of their big move. They made a bunch. They got Rubio, but so I think he's gonna be solid for them. But yeah, they just kind of, I don't know. Despite all these moves and picking up Anthony Edwards, I mean, they still Towns is back now. Interesting thing with Towns, and Towns is not going to get too in depth in here, but he's had a very challenging offseason to say the least, with all the stuff he's been dealing with. So I'm kind of questioning his availability or mindset coming into this season. I don't think you're gonna see a top 5 guy the whole season in Towns. I think and understandably so, his mind's gonna be elsewhere parts of the season. So I mean they're not a playoff team, even with Anthony Edwards there now, with Cat and Rubio and whatnot, and so I gave them a B. Just some decent moves, and they got Ed Davis, and so it's gonna be interesting. So yeah, just an off season aside from the Edwards pick, and they're just gonna they won't be the worst team in the West, but they're not gonna. I don't think they're really gonna sit the playoffs next year.
Yeah, I mean, really, their offseason was the number 1 overall pick. I mean, if you really want to break it down. Yep. And they did sign Malik Beasley to a pretty hefty deal. I was kind of surprised with acquiring Rubio, Russell, Anthony Edwards, and Malik Beasley. You're paying your guards a lot of money here, so I'm kind of interested to see how that shakes out throughout the season. I'm assuming Malik Beasley is going to come off the bench and be more of like a Jamal Crawford shot of energy kind of player, but
that's a lot. That's a lot of money to pay for that kind of guy.
Yeah, that's why I think it's a little crazy, but I mean that's probably the situation we're in right now. But I'm just interested overall to see how D'Angelo Russell, Anthony Edwards, and Karl Anthony Towns mesh. I mean, those are 3 potential all-star players. This could be the Timberwolves' opportunity to really break through, not this season, but over the next few years. So, I mean, it's all going to come down to how those 3 guys gel and if they decide they want to play some defense. Yep. So we'll see how it shakes out. Let's go to, I think we're just going to start off with a bunch of your favorites here. So the first few are going to take an hour here, but now we have the New Orleans Pelicans. Drafted Kira Lewis Jr. 13th overall, traded for Eric Bledsoe and Steven Adams, signed Willie Hernan-Gomez, Wayne and Gabriel, and Sindarius Thornwell they re-signed, and through trade, they lost Drew Holiday and Darius Miller. They lost Jahlil Okafor, and these are via free agent now. Derek Favors, Etuan Moore, Zylan Cheatham, Josh Gray, Frank Jackson, and Kenrick Williams. So, what do you have, man?
Oh yeah, I mean, obviously now started with the draft, very, very puzzling. One of the more another puzzling draft pick by it might be the probably the second most puzzling move pick of the first round aside from the Patrick Williams Bulls pick. But I mean Kira Lewis. One thing you can't say about him is that he's slow. He might be the fastest play. He might be the fastest player in the draft. And they got a young team led by Zion, and so that's gonna be. I mean, that fit kind of works, but they kind of have a. I would say they have a bit of a logjam in the backcourt right now with Lonzo Ball, Eric Bledsoe, Kira Lewis, Nikhil Walker there as well. So they have a bit of a logjam at the backcourt, which is more so why I was kind of puzzled by the Kira Lewis. Uh, I thought it made so much sense for them to go with Aaron Nesmith, but that's not the route they went. But we'll have to see. I mean, they did set themselves up incredible for future off seasons. They got like 3 first rounders or something like that from Milwaukee, and then another 2 or 3 pick swaps with Milwaukee. So they got an Anthony Davis level haul for Jrue Holiday. So good for them from setting themselves up for a future perspective. I think. Oh, I keep forgetting they got George Hill too. Like what's going on in this backcourt? Nobody knows. They have 5 or 6 quality guards, and there's only so many minutes in that to go around. So I don't know how that's gonna work going forward. It seems like from what I'm hearing, the day one backcourt's probably gonna be Eric Bledsoe and Lonzo Ball, but we'll have to see going forward how Walker and Kira Lewis and Hill kind of fit into that. But Steven Adams, I think, is a really good pairing with Zion in the front court. They're both really excited to play with each other, so that's good. I've been saying that I think the Pelicans take a minor step forward, is what I've been saying for a while now.
Are we calling it minor now?
We're calling it minor.
I think you said that they were going to be a championship contender a few months ago, so we're backing off of that now.
No, not necessarily. So obviously I gave them a B plus. I do think they're going to be a playoff team next season. I think the biggest question for them, obviously, is how you're going to handle that backcourt rotation. I think that will be very interesting. I think another very interesting coming out is, and I didn't even want to mention his name, but Stan Van Gundy, who's gonna the coach, I guess, of the Pelicans. He came out and told Zion that there is no minutes restriction on Zion this season. So if we get to see an unleashed Zion, we didn't really see the full potential of Zion last season because he was kind of capped with the minutes. But if we ever see a full unleashed Zion with all this backcourt talent, pairing him with Steven Adams in the front court, I expect this team to be a playoff team next season. So now they're not going to win the NBA championship.
Yes, sir.
But they will. I do think they will be a playoff team next season. We'll just have to see them. They have one of the brightest futures on any team in the league. So.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, this team's off season it comes down, or their season as a whole really comes down to the development of these young players. Zion had a great rookie season for the portion he played, but can he launch himself into being an all-star, superstar, franchise-changing player? That's still yet to be seen. Brandon Ingram last year looked like he could be a really strong.
I didn't even mention it. Brandon Ingram got paid.
He got paid, and he last season looked like he could be a number 2 on a championship team. He really looked that good, and I like the Eric Bledsoe, bringing him over. mean, I don't think it's necessarily much of an improvement, or it's a lesser Drew Holiday, really. But I mean, still, he adds a veteran presence that plays strong defense. And I mean, their whole season just comes down to the development of these players. They weren't going to go out there and, sign Fred VanVleet or any of these other bigger free agents. They're relying strictly on their young depth here. They still have Jackson Hayes. You mentioned Nikhil Alexander-Walker. Still haven't seen a lot from him. Even
Probably
Josh
not
Hart.
from this season either.
Yeah, you probably won't. So they're really relying on these young guys developing. So the biggest move they made this offseason could potentially be Stan Van Gundy and his ability to develop these young players. So, yeah, that's the reality that they're living in right now. So let's go over to our next team here, the Sacramento Kings. Through the draft, they drafted Tyrese Halliburton 12th overall, Robert Woodard 40th overall, and then Jamias Ramsey 43rd overall. They signed Hassan Whiteside via free agency, and then they lost via free agency Harry Giles, Kent Bazemore, Bogdan Bogdanovic, Corey Brewer, Yogi Ferrell, Kyle Guy, Daquan Jeffries, and Alex Len.
All right, there's some big heavy hitters for names there.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm gonna start off by saying, and Tyrese Halliburton was my favorite pick of the draft. I think the Kings I honestly think the Kings might have gotten the steal of the draft, taking Halliburton at 12. I honestly think Halliburton should have been a top 5 pick. For the Kings to get him at 12, I think is a great move for them. Playing next to De'Aaron Fox, who got paid. They paid De'Aaron Fox, so I think it's going to be a Fox and Halliburton backcourt for going forward to them. We'll see how that works out. Jamias Ramsey is going to be one of the more underrated second-round draft selections. But I mean, talk about, and then you talk about their free. I mean, Hassan Whiteside could end up. Now, man, Hassan Whiteside went from looking to being close to a max type player, like he was on that path when he was with Miami, and then he's just don't know what happened to him. But now signing, but he's a guy that can go if he pans out and he plays up to his potential. He can go from making just this $2.3 million that he has the golden opportunity to set himself up for a gigantic payday next offseason if he can just improve and be what he was in Miami. So I mean, the trades they made weren't really that noteworthy, but overall I gave them a B. A lot to do with the Halliburton signing. Now, still kind of surprised that Buddy Hield's on the team. He's been pretty much trashing the organization all off season. So I don't know what they're doing, still holding on to him. I don't know if they think they can get a Drew Holiday type return for him or something. It's like, I don't know what they're thinking, but I mean, it seems like I feel like if they would have traded him by now, they would have. So I think you're at least going to enter the season with Buddy Hield on that team. Not the worst thing. Still going to provide some shooting for them, but they're not. They're one of the teams. So I like their future going forward with De'Aaron Fox and Halliburton in the backcourt, but they're gonna be they're not gonna be that good this season. Future they have a chance to really do something, but they're gonna be one of the bottom teams in the league, West, just based on the lack of experience on their roster. So
yeah, and I've read a lot of training camp reports of people really excited about this team. De'Aaron Fox looked like an all-star player last season. Tyrese Halliburton, early reports are he's looked really good in camp, and some people are calling him a Rookie of the Year candidate. At the 3 forward position, they don't have a ton of talent right now. They have Harrison Barnes, Glenn Robinson. Maybe they slide Buddy Hield over there to play with Halliburton and Fox. I don't know if that makes much sense, but and then Marvin Bagley, who they had high hopes for. He's been healthy so far, still only 21 years old. Looked pretty good in limited minutes last year. And then with Rashawn Holmes and Hassan Whiteside, you have two pretty capable centers that can really protect the paint. So I think that this is an intriguing team. It's going to be tough to break through in the Western Conference, but I think that they'll be fun to watch at least. There's some intrigue there. All right, let's go to a team that's not used to being this low. That is the San Antonio Spurs. Very, very unexciting here. This is going to be one of the quick ones. I won't comment too much, but through the draft, they acquired Devin Vassell, 11th overall, Trey Jones, 41st overall, and then they lost Bryn Forbes and Marco Bellinelli. That's it.
Oh, they also lost Shimize Medu or whatever, however you pronounce
Yeah,
it.
what was I thinking?
Yeah, how exciting. Starting off with the draft, Devin Vassell, while I think it might have been a tad early for him being picked, I do think he fits the mold of a typical Spurs player. So I think from an organization standpoint, I think it makes a lot of sense. Same with Trey Jones, and he's a guy who, Mac, when we did our mocks, I think I was just a tad off on where I thought he would go. But he went about 21 picks later than what I expected. So, but I think he's just now year one. Now they did lose a couple of bench backcourt pieces. Maybe that opens up a tad bit of playing time for Trey Jones. But you know and I know how Greg Popovich likes to play his rookies. He doesn't really give them a lot of run off the bat, so it's going to be really difficult for Trey Jones to find consistent playing time this season. I do think down the road he could be an interesting piece. But they didn't really, in terms of their offseason, like it was obviously all in the draft. They didn't bring everybody in, so I just gave them a C. I don't like saying. And DeMar DeRozan picked up his option. A little surprising. I wasn't expecting DeMar DeRozan. It doesn't seem like DeMar DeRozan's very happy there, but maybe because of the uncertainty of the offseason, he decided to just opt in and get paid for one more year. But and this sad. Say even with Greg Popovich back, I don't. And Tim Duncan is no longer.
Aw.
Yeah, I know you didn't want me to mention that, but Tim Duncan is no longer on the staff. So the bottom line is, I'm not gonna disrespect Greg Popovich and say they're gonna be one of the bottom couple teams in the West, because I think too highly of Greg Popovich. But the reality is that they're most likely not gonna be a playoff team next year. So that's sad to say, but that's where I'm at with that.
Yeah, he's never missed the playoffs in back-to-back seasons in his career, so that's kind of bizarre to think about.
You think this is going to be a first?
Yes, because this is arguably the least talented team in the entire league, in my opinion.
Besides, even less talented than the Knicks?
I said arguably, so...
Arguably.
They're probably bottom.
Oh, you think the Pistons have more talent than the Spurs?
I don't think that, but this is a team that's in rebuild, and this is different because when they were rebuilding before, they replaced David Robinson with Tim Duncan, and this time they replaced Tim Duncan with. They're still trying to figure it out, honestly.
They got 95-year-old LaMarcus Aldridge.
This rebuild has not gone very well for the Spurs. Kawhi was supposed to bridge the gap into the next generation of Spurs success, and then he walked. So, they're in a tough spot because this is once again a team. They have a lot of youth, and Greg Popovich likes to win, and he does not like to throw his youth into the fire. He likes to really develop them and give them an opportunity to learn. But their last few years of first-round picks, it's time to let them go. Lonnie Walker, Keldon Johnson have been their first-round picks the past 2 years. They had some moments in the bubble, and this is the Spurs' time where they need to let them go. You got to let them run wild. Yeah. Play Devin Vassell. You just took him 11th overall. Don't let them just sit there. You got to develop them in game situations. So I think they could potentially sneak into the playoffs. I think it'll be tough. I'm not going to predict them to do that, but LaMarcus Aldridge, if he's healthy, and DeMar DeRozan are a solid duo. You still have DeJounte Murray as one of the best defensive guards. I liked what they did in the draft with Trey Jones and Devin Vassell. I mean, they fit the Spurs mold. I don't think they needed Trey Jones, but he was too good to pass up at that spot. So I don't know. They're in flux right now. I don't know what they're going to do because, we've talked about it when we talked about the Orlando Magic. They're a team that needed a superstar. Oddly enough, the Spurs are in the same spot right now. They have no superstar that's guiding this team right now, and I personally don't see any of these young guys developing into that. So I'm a little concerned, but yeah, and they didn't really do anything to get rid of those concerns this offseason. The fact that they didn't trade or haven't moved on from DeRozan or Aldridge makes me think that they can be competitive, because if they were in full rebuild mode, you have no reason to hold on to those guys. So we'll see how it turns out. Popovich can make any. I mean, they were a borderline playoff team last year. They were only a game and a half out. We have to remember that. And that roster was terrible and depleted and beat up. They're going to be healthy. Those young guys are going to be more experienced. So, I mean, maybe we're not giving them enough credit for what Pop can do, but I don't know. This roster doesn't look very promising to me.
Yeah.
So let's go over to the Phoenix Suns now. The Bubble Kings. They've had an interesting offseason. Drafted Jalen Smith 10th overall, which we've talked about as one of the more questionable first round picks. They traded for Chris Paul and Abdel Nader. In free agency, they signed Jay Crowder, Etuan Moore, and re-signed Dario Saric. Then players they lost, they traded Ricky Rubio, Ty Jerome, Kelly Oubre, and Jalen Lecque. Free agency, they lost Aaron Baines, Chiak Diallo, Frank Kaminsky, and Tariq Owens. And this is, I'll just say before you make your comments, this is one of the reasons I really like the NBA today, is with the Golden State Warriors the past few seasons, I always felt like no matter what, that they were locked in and they were going to be in the championship. But there's a lot of parity in the NBA right now. I think when we do our standings predictions, it's going to be really tough to predict who the top 8 teams are, because I think there's a lot of really good competitive teams. And that's one of the reasons I think it'll be tough for the Spurs to make it, is just because even the Suns, I mean, when you look at it, they have a really interesting and fun roster. I'm not saying they're going to win a championship, but I mean, they should be competitive. So what do you think of this offseason for them?
Yeah, I like it. I mean, the Jalen Smith pick, I think that was a lot way too early for him, but he definitely has that potential. Love the Jay Crowder signing for him. Give them a veteran presence and some defense on this team, with Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton, and then the Chris Paul. It's gonna be. They're gonna be one of the most tough teams to predict, like you mentioned. I mean, I would not. Can they make the playoffs? I absolutely think they can make the playoffs. Now, will they? That's I don't know. But they're one of those I don't know teams that could easily make the playoffs. So they're going to be a very interesting one to predict. I gave them a B plus. Love the Chris Paul acquisition going forward for them. I mean, mainly just for this season, I think. It was in part to keep Booker satisfied, at least for this season, because Booker has repeatedly said he doesn't want to lose anymore. Mm-hmm. He said that for the past couple seasons, so I think that was a move to kind of at least show him that they're trying. So wouldn't be shocked to see them make the playoffs this year. I think Booker can ascend himself into an elite level player this season. I think he has that kind of potential. I think Chris Paul can help bring that out of him. So we'll have to see going forward for them how this all works out.
Yeah, and they'll definitely be a fun team to watch. They have a nice big 3 there with Paul, Ayton, and Booker. Jay Crowder was really important for Miami last year and provides some nice veteran leadership. So I like what they did, and I'm interested to see where they fit in into this crazy Western Conference picture. So
Yep.
let's go to who do I have next here? I got myself out of order. The Memphis Grizzlies. All right. The Memphis Grizzlies. Where are you? There you are. Okay. Memphis Grizzlies through the draft acquired Desmond Bain, 30th overall, Xavier Tillman, 35th overall, Killian Tilly, undrafted, but they signed him. And then they traded for Mario Hazonia,
Home.
and they lost through free agency Josh Jackson, John Concher, Jonte Porter, Anthony Tolliver, and Yuta Wantabe. So,
You know,
you like that, Wantabe?
that's cool.
All right, what do you have for them, Caveman?
That's the most exciting thing. That's the most exciting thing you can say about their off season. I mean, they've been in a weird spot ever since the Mike Conley and Zach Randolph days were been. I mean, those were the days where I'm sure you loved the Memphis Grizzlies back in
Oh
those
yeah.
days.
Oh, I
I'm
did.
sure you love the Memphis, but the reality is they're not. They're a far cry from what that team was. Now I love John Morant going forward. I think he easily has superstar potential in him, as long as he continues to take steps forward. Desmond Bain, very under the radar draft pick, but aside from that, there's really nothing really to really note. I mean, I give them a C minus. The Bain pickup was solid, but other than that, Mario Hazonia is not really gonna do anything, I don't think. But yeah, they're just very uneventful. I don't expect them, even they have a young pairing in Jaren Jackson and John Morant, but they don't really have a ton around that. I don't think Jaren Jackson and John Morant's enough to really make them a playoff contender. I know although they were not that bad this season. I would say they almost made the playoff. They almost made the playoffs, but
They did. Yeah.
it's weird to think that despite having John Morant and Jaren Jackson, I think they're one of the teams that played better than they are. So I do expect them, especially with all the other teams behind them. We just talked about Phoenix being one of them. I do think they slipped back a couple spots, and I don't think they're really going to be in serious contention for a playoff spot next year.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at it, and it's the case with a lot of these teams, the Memphis Grizzlies are legitimately almost the same exact team they were last season. I mean, they really are almost. I mean, I mentioned some of those names, but none of those guys are going to move the needle that they gained or lost, in my opinion. So, I mean, you still have. I love Ja Morant for fantasy, just for the record this year, because I think his usage is going to have to be off the chain because they don't have a ton of offensive threats. So there's going to be a lot.
But though Jaren Jackson and John Morant might be the only two fantasy assets on that team this year.
Yeah, I mean, Dylan Brooks is actually pretty good. He provides in a few categories, but I mean, yeah, still not a huge name by any stretch of the imagination. But yeah, I mean, based on the Suns being better, I mean, you have to talk about. I mean, the Warriors technically didn't make the playoffs. Someone's gonna have to get bumped out for the Warriors. I mean, probably the Thunder, but that's a conversation for later. But yeah, I mean, it's just tough to predict right now. I can't see the Grizzlies making it unless there's a huge, Ja Morant explodes and averages 30 points this season and really jumps into his own, which, hey, I mean, you never know. I mean, he has that kind of potential. I would be surprised if it was this quick, but
2 years away from that probably, but
I would say so. Yeah, I think the Grizzlies didn't really do much to move the needle here. So let's go. We're into the playoffs now officially. The Grizzlies were in the play-in game, but the Trailblazers officially made the playoffs. So for Portland, through the draft, only one draft pick, 46 overall, CJLB. Through trade, they acquired Robert Covington and Enes Kanter. And then through free agency, they signed Derek Jones Jr. from the Miami Heat. They lost via trade Trevor Ariza and Mario Hazonia.
no!
I know, it's tragic. Via free agency, they lost Jalen Adams, Hassan Whiteside, Moses Brown, Wayne Gabriel, Jalen Horde, and Caleb Swanigan.
Swanigan. Like that's a nice Irish name. Uh, like going first of all, I love. It's weird to start off. I love the fact that they brought back Carmelo Anthony. I think that's going to be a very under the radar. And I mentioned this a couple. It's weird to think you go from like a player of Carmelo Anthony's caliber from being a all-star player every season for a while, and then kind of think he kind of hit rock bottom, and then he was able to. It's a weird. It's a weird like. It's weirdly inspiring, but that's just weird to say that Carmelo Anthony coming back to life is inspiring. But yeah, they said they made a couple of a nice additions, adding Cantor and Covington. They kind of need. It's gonna be interesting. Kind of while I like Carmelo Anthony, I don't think he's at the point in his career where he can be a third star on a championship team. Can Covington be that third star on a championship team?
No.
Most likely not either, but I do think they got better. They didn't really lose anybody of note. So I do think I honestly, and remember they didn't have CJ McCollum and Damian Lillard didn't play a ton together last season. So I do think with a full season of them 100% healthy, with Covington and with Cantor and with Melo back, I think they're better than the 8th seed. We mentioned this when they played the Lakers. They like this is one of the best 8th seeds that we've ever seen.
Yeah.
On history, but I do think they're better. I think they can vault into the 5th, 6th type seed in the West next season. But I still don't think they're not championship contenders in my opinion. But they're going to be a really solid team. They're going to give whoever they play in the first round a good run for their money. But going forward, you got CJ McCollum and Damian Lillard, arguably one, if not the best backcourt in the league. So they're going to be good next season.
Yeah, and I liked the Derek Jones signing as well.
Yep.
I thought he's going to be a really under the radar signing for somebody. And the reality with this team is, as much as that duo of Lillard and McCollum can be dangerous, they were the 3rd worst defensive team in the entire Western Conference last year. So that's not going to do it. That's why I like the Robert.
Yeah. They did add to the defense a little bit.
Yeah, and that's why I think Covington is really critical there. A big piece was Nurkic, their center, missed a lot of time last year, and he definitely is going to help that defensive presence as well, just his return in general. So yeah, Derek Jones has a lot of defensive upside as well. So I think that they made some small moves that can move the needle more than people think for them. I still don't see them as a championship contender, but yeah, definitely a solid, 5, 6, 7 competitive seed. They're not going to get swept or embarrassed or anything crazy like that. So let's go to the Dallas Mavericks, the 7th seed here. They had, to me, one of the best under the radar drafts. Drafted Josh Green, 18th overall. Tyrell Terry, 31st overall, and then Tyler Bay, 36th overall. All 3 of those guys had rumblings of being first-round picks. And so they had great value there, attained some great value. Via trade, they acquired Josh Richardson and James Johnson. Free agency, they signed Wes Iwundu from the Magic and re-signed J.J. Barea and Willie Cauley-Stein. Guys they lost via trade, Seth Curry, DeLon Wright, and Justin Jackson. Free agents that they lost, J.J. Barea. They ended up re-signing him. I put him in the wrong category. Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, Courtney Lee, Josh Reeves, and Antonius Cleveland.
Actually, I forgot to mention this. They actually yesterday released JJ Barea.
Oh, so it did. Okay, I was like, I conflicted my own notes. I was like, why did? Okay.
Yeah, they did release. They released which I haven't really read into it, but they did release him.
There
I
you
mean,
go.
start off, man. They might have had one. Overall they might have had the best draft, and that's the reality. Josh Green, Josh Green, obviously, you mentioned my favorite player in this draft. Really one of the best. If might be, I think in my opinion, the second best 3-and-D player out of the draft, aside from Patrick Williams. Tyrell Terry, who we mentioned, he has Steph Curry like upside shooting the ball. So, I mean, yeah, it's nice to have a guy that has Steph Curry potential, I would say. Tyler Bay, very under the radar as well. But I mean, obviously that was their off season, and then they got Josh Richardson as well, which is going to be a good pickup. A lot of this is going to depend on obviously Luka Doncic. I mean, it's crazy to think that Luka Doncic can improve, which he can, and that's just insane. That's a whole nother topic about the potential of Luka Doncic. But obviously Porzingis is gonna miss the first couple weeks of the season, which we'll see how that affects them out of the gate. But they're gonna be they're I don't know if I would say they're championship contenders, but I would not be shocked to see them in the top 5 in the Western Conference next season. I think Luka Doncic is that dude. Now, I I do think Luka Doncic has to improve a little bit better defensively. To really just improve to the point of what being the overall consensus number 1 player in the league instead of being in contention. Like that's what like we're just really splitting hairs there. But for the Mavericks to be true championship contenders, I do think that Luka Doncic has to improve quite a bit on the defensive end. But going forward, they're going to be a playoff team. They're going to be a dangerous lower seed. And we'll have to see if Luka Doncic can take that step forward defensively. That can make all the difference for them to be from being true championship contenders, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think some of the moves that they made were to try to cover up some of those defensive liabilities that Luka has. Josh Richardson's pretty strong.
Yeah.
Josh Green is pretty strong defensively. So, I think those were smart moves. Do I think they're much better than last season? I mean, that's up for debate. I would say maybe slightly. So I think they are relying on their team as a whole to improve. And they're hoping that Porzingis can play a majority of the season because I definitely think he can be a big part of their playoff success, whether or not he's healthy. So, yeah, I mean, not too exciting of an off season, but definitely a lot to look forward to. Unlike some of these other teams where we're saying who's their superstar, I think we may know with the Mavericks. So that's so let's go over to Utah Jazz now. Through the draft, they acquired Udoka Azubuike and Elijah Hughes. Free agency, they signed Derek Favors, which was confusing to me at first because he used to be there and now he's back. In free agency, they lost Jarrell Brantley, Jawan Morgan, Emmanuel Mudiay, and Justin Wright Foreman. And then via trade, they lost Ed Davis and Tony Bradley. So not much excitement here for the Jazz.
No, and they did. Donovan Mitchell got paid. Another guy that kind of got the money. I think well deserved for him. I mean, going forward, the Jazz are. I mean, I think they're. That's. I don't. They're going to be a playoff team. I was kind of, as I was talking, I was kind of unsure how I wanted to say that, but Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell will have to see, and I've been on the record saying I don't know that chemistry between them is definitely off, to say the least. But I think going forward, I think it's probably in both their best interest and the Jazz best interest to just maybe they're only talking on the court and then they never see each other off the court. That might be how that probably will be how that situation works out, but that's all that matters. That's all that truly matters is how they perform together on the court. So, I mean, The Derek Favors and Rudy Gobert pairing is going to be a problem for a lot of teams in the middle. I mean, Gobert is a tall, lengthy dude that all he does is block shots and rebounds, but I think given this team, I don't know if much more is really. I mean, you can't really get anything more out of Gobert anyways, but I mean, they're gonna be a Azubuike, another solid draft pick, but
Mm-hmm.
they're gonna be, and then all the trades they made are either lower level draft pick trades, but they're gonna be a playoff team next season. Don't I think they might slip a spot or two to 7-8 in my opinion, but they're gonna be very solid going forward. Definitely think they're still a playoff team, but not a championship contender. So.
Yeah. And I think the tough thing with this team is, I love my defense, and they're one of the best defensive teams in the West. But the issue right now is they're actually not strong enough offensively. And we kind of saw that in the playoffs a little bit. Is they were one of the lowest scoring teams in the entire Western Conference. That's even when you're considering all the non-playoff teams. So, I mean, that's really concerning. So, as much as you can, defense is important, you still do have to have that scoring punch. And I don't know if they have enough scoring punch right now to take it to that next level. At this point, I think they're still going to be, a 6 seed, 7 seed, right in that range, just because they're so strong defensively. But I don't think they made a big enough move on the offensive side, bringing in a third. Because when you talk about their two, their big two being Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell. I mean, Rudy Gobert is not great offensively. So, I mean, realistically, a lot of the offensive load is on Donovan Mitchell. So, I think they need to add more scoring punch. They didn't really do so this offseason. So, I think they'll be kind of in the same situation they were this previous year.
Mm-hmm.
All right, next we have everybody's favorite playoff team, the Oklahoma City Thunder. I will go out there and say they're not going to be in the playoffs next season. That's my bold prediction.
That's
Um,
pretty bold.
through the draft, they acquired a few foreign guys because they wanted to see me struggle to say their names primarily. But they got Alexis Pukasevsky, Theo Maledon, and Vic Krevsky. Via trade, they acquired a lot of players. Al Horford. I'm not even going to mention the draft picks, which are plentiful. What do they have? 16 over the next 6 years. 16
Yeah.
first-round picks, something like that.
They made several deals for picks in fucking 2027.
Yeah, but they're just ahead of everybody apparently. So Al Horford, they acquired. Ty Jerome, Jalen LeCue, Vincent Poirier, Trevor Ariza, who went to like 30 different teams, Justin Jackson, George Hill, who got traded like 30 different times, Darius Miller, TJ Leaf, and then they lost Chris Paul, Dennis Schroeder, Terrence Ferguson, Abdel Nader, Steven Adams. Via free agency, they lost Gallinari, Nerlens Noel, Deontay Burton, Devin Hall, Kevin Hervey, Andre Roberson. At this point, they've made so many trades that even they're not sure who's on the roster anymore, and they're still trying to figure it out. So, what do you think of this offseason here, Caveman?
Man, I mean, man, I'm gonna be. I feel like I'm in a consensus among a lot of people. I absolutely hated this offseason for the Thunder. I know they got like 20 picks in the next 3 or 4 seasons, but for me, like, I know Chris Paul wasn't getting any younger, but I think especially in terms of the development of Shai, who I like Shai's potential, but I think the amount of offensive and just overall workload on him this year is actually going to hurt him going forward. I think there's going to be way too much pressure on Shai to really. When you look at their roster, he's the only offensive threat on that team next season. That's it. It's Shai. And that's just way too much. And he's going to have to be a playmaker for him as well. Playmaking to who? Who is he? Who is he?
Al
Passing the ball
Horford.
to? Al Horford. I forgot. I'm surprised they still have him. To be honest with you, but I mean, that's the They're. I'm overall concerned. I'm just upset that they traded Chris Paul. I think, especially for the development of Shy, I think it would have benefited them greatly to have just keep Chris Paul around. I mean, what this all these draft picks, to me it doesn't make any sense, because let's say these draft picks, some of them pan out, or they package them and pan out, or whatever have you. What, they're going to be where they were last year? In like 5 years, they're going to have this team that they had last year, and that's what I think personally, is like, if these draft picks pan out, they're going to be what they were last year. So why couldn't they just kept the band together and maybe improved? Who knows? But they're not going to be a playoff team next year, and it would not shock me one bit if they were the worst team in the Western Conference. I think that's how bad they're going to be this year. So
Yeah, I'd agree. I think they're playing for Imani Bates in 2022 right now, honestly. But I mean, I love honestly what they're doing, because number one, they surprised last year, and we said that a million times. They had no business making the playoffs in the Western Conference, and it was an impressive coaching job. You know, they played tough defense. It was a great run for them. But I mean, they weren't going to ever win a championship with how they were constructed last year. Never. I mean, never ever. And free agents aren't going to come here most likely. So their best bet is to rebuild through the draft. And I'm sorry, when you have 16 first round picks, just by accident, you have to draft a few all-stars. even by accident. And at least one of them has to turn out to be a superstar, especially with their picks being really good the next few years. So, and next year's class is supposed to be very deep, by the way. A lot of people have it pegged as a really nice class, especially at the top. So, you know, they're trying to scout ahead, you know, trying to get Imani Bates and Bronny James, you know, they're scouting.
Imani Bates, the Bronny and Shy Alexander's going to be their big three.
Yeah. On a side note, but I mean, I love, just to me, if you want to truly rebuild into a championship contender, just tear it down. I mean, that's what they're doing, because I don't think they were in a position where they could have retooled and won a championship. I think they were too far away. And the amount of assets that they got for just kind of role players is really impressive to me, honestly. I mean, when you look at the guys that they got rid of, there's no way they should have ended up with 16 first-round picks. So I think they did a really good job at rebuilding and retooling, or rebuilding, really. And on a side note, I love Shy in fantasy this year, because he's gonna do a lot, because he has.
I like he's gonna be good for fantasy, but I think for him as an overall player in terms of his development, it's gonna be bad.
Oh, it's terrible, absolutely terrible.
Fantasy, great. I think he can return second round value. I think he has that much.
He could probably return first round value. He honestly might have to average like 30 points and 8 rebounds and 8 assists, because
he's gonna be the third player to ever average a triple double.
But it'll be a lot on him this year, or it'll be very telling in terms of where he's going to be, because you can also look at it on the reverse side, is that defenses are going to key in on him. So he's not going to have a lot of open shots. So it's going to be a big year for him to prove, is he, you know, a superstar, an all-star? You know, what kind of caliber player can he be? Because if he can have a huge season with all eyes on him, he's going to be headed down the right direction. Or it could go in the reverse, and we might never hear from him again. But let's not hope that happens. Let's go to your one of your favorites now. Maybe not one of your favorites anymore, but the Houston Rockets had a off season. They had one. No, I liked their off season actually, but they traded for John Wall. They drafted Kenyon Martin Jr., signed Christian Wood, Jason Tate, and DeMarcus Cousins. And then via trade, they lost Robert Covington, Russell Westbrook, and via trade. And then free agency, they lost Jeff Green, Bruno Caboclo, Damari Carroll, Tyson Chandler, Michael Frazier, Gerald Green, Luke Amount, Austin Rivers, Thabo. Now, I don't like saying his name. There's names that I don't like saying, okay? Austin Rivers, Thabo Cephalosha, William Howard. Go ahead, Caveman.
Okay. Anyways, starting off, obviously the big trade involving Wall and Westbrook. I mean, I talked about it from the Wizards' perspective in the East, but for the Rockets, I honestly don't like it and don't think it makes a lot of sense. I mean, especially with having absolutely no clue whether James Harden is going to be on the roster the entire season. That's the reality of the situation with uh, that. So, I mean, yeah. Uh, so we lost Jordan here. I'm gonna kind of talk about the last couple myself here, and then so overall, I'm giving the Rockets a B minus, because I didn't really like the 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 John Wall Russell Westbrook trade, but they did get a first round pick out of it, so that kind of salvages it a little bit. Uh, so we'll have to see going forward. If James Harden's on the roster the entire season, I do uh I do expect them to, obviously they're going to be a playoff team, especially with Christian Wood there now and DeMarcus Cousins, who I think could have a nice bounce back season. But if James Harden's not on the roster, they're going to be one of the worst teams in the league. So he's kind of on that Giannis level in terms of impact on how he could swing a team. So that's the Rockets. Next up, we're going to talk about the Denver Nuggets, who had a very interesting off season. I would say kind of under the radar. In the draft, they took Zeke Nanji, 22nd overall. They acquired RJ Hampton in a trade involving the Bucks for at 24th overall. In free agency, they brought in JaMychal Green, 2 years, $14.7 million. A couple of lower end guys. They lost Jeremy Grant to Detroit. They lost Mason Plumlee to Detroit. They lost Vonleh to Chicago, and they lost Torrey Craig to Milwaukee. They had the Jeremy Grant was technically a sign and trade. The kind of just the logistics of it, they really didn't get much. And then they got RJ Hampton in that 4-team biggest trade in that deal with the Bucks, Pelicans, and Thunder. I mean, overall, I think Jamal Murray and Jokic is going to be one of the best pairings in the league. I think they work very well together, and they'll work very well together going forward. Zeke Nanji and RJ Hampton are two rookies that are going to come in. I think they're going to be excellent role players and contributors on this team. JaMychal Green is going to be a very under the radar signing. I think I gave them a B, and I think going forward for them, I still don't know if I would call them a championship contender, but I do think they have a chance if Murray and Jokic can continue to develop. Jokic is already a superstar in this league. If Jamal Murray can take that step and if he becomes a superstar or close to that, I do think that they have the potential to be something special, even in the West. So going on, we have the last couple teams here before we wrap up this Western Conference. We got the Los Angeles Clippers, who had one of the most eventful off seasons, I would say. They let go of Doc Rivers and promoted Tyronn Lue to be their next head coach. I like that move for them going forward. They didn't have a first round pick this year, but they did end up getting rights the 55th pick Jay Scrubb in a deal with the Pistons and Nets. And they also got the 33rd pick in Daniel Aturu in a deal with in that deal. Free agency wise, start off by saying they did. This came out yesterday. They gave Paul George a max deal, a 5-year, 220 range deal. Not entirely sure what that's about, but we'll have to see how that works going forward. In free agency, they lost Montrezl Harrell, who signed a 2-year, $19 million deal with the rival Lakers. They lost JaMychal Green, who went to Denver. They retained Marcus Morris, very under the radar retaining for him. They retained Patrick Patterson. They got Nicholas Batum, who we'll see if he has absolutely anything left in the tank. And then they got Serge Ibaka, who I think is going to be a very solid addition for them, and pretty much their Montrezl Harrell replacement. Let's see, via the trade market, they, like I mentioned, they made a couple of draft trades. They acquired Luke Kennard from Detroit and center Justin Patton. So they made those moves. Going forward for the Clippers, I mean, you have Kawhi Leonard and you have Paul George. You have two of the top 10, 15-ish players in the league. So you're always gonna be in that contention. Tyronn Lue is not a huge step down from Doc Rivers. So they're gonna be a top 3-4 seed in the Western Conference next season. I think even with I didn't mention they lost Shamet and Bruce Brown in that deal that brought back Kennard and Jay Scrubb, but so they're gonna be they're gonna be a top. I mean, I know they melted down last season in the playoffs. I don't know. I don't think they're gonna predict that's gonna happen again with a meltdown, but they're gonna be a title contender who, in my opinion, probably won't win a championship. Don't think they have the pairing of Kawhi and Paul George works to championship level contention, I would say. And then wrapping up this Western Conference kind of off-season reviews and grades. Oh, there's Jordan. He's back.
I'm back.
You missed the Nuggets and the Clippers. I just finished them up. So
nobody likes the Clippers.
Nobody likes so hey, you can take the lead. You get the final team. We still have the Los Angeles Lakers to talk about.
I like that one, actually. We've mentioned them in a few lives, but I kind of like what they did this offseason. So the Lakers here are NBA champions, added Montrezl Harrell via free agency, Marc Gasol, Wesley Matthews, Markieff Morris, who they re-signed, Jared Dudley they re-signed. And then this site that I'm using has a Little Giannis on here as well. That's what he gets now. His name's Little Giannis. Post this. Then they traded for Dennis Schroeder, Jordan Bell, and Alfonso McKinney. via trade, they lost Danny Green and JaVale McGee. Via free agency, they lost Rondo, Avery Bradley, Dwight Howard, J.R. Smith, Dion Waiters.
Oh, they lost JR?
Yeah, I know. Sad, isn't it? And Quinn Cook. You know, you got to throw
then they lost JR. That's our entire offseason. They're bad now.
They're not going to even make the playoffs, I would say. But I mentioned that there's a lot of people that are kind of on the fence about this free agency and offseason for the Lakers, but I really like it. I mean, when you start with Montrezl Harrell, I think that he was arguably the steal of the entire offseason for any team. I mean, they did not sign him to nearly as much money as I would have expected him to go for. And he adds, I mean, the biggest thing, and it's similar to what I talked about with the Utah Jazz not having a very strong scoring punch. Honestly, the Lakers were kind of in the middle of the conference in scoring last year. And the reason they were kind of able to overcome that is because they have LeBron and Anthony Davis. But they really struggled with having a strong third scorer. I mean, we saw times where Kyle Kuzma did it. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope came through for them in a few games, but they really didn't have a strong third scoring punch. So I think with the addition of Schroeder and Montrezl Harrell, they added some legitimately strong offensive players. Wesley Matthews is a great replacement for Danny Green. I mean, I think they're pretty evenly swapped. But I think what they did offensively was huge for them, and they're the champs, and I would argue they got even better. I would say Marc Gasol as a whole is better than Dwight Howard right now at the center position. We saw Dwight Howard with his little stretch during the playoffs, but I think Marc Gasol is a little more consistent right now. So I really like what they did, and I think that they're in a prime position to go back to back. Even though there's a lot of strong teams, like I said, I think in today's NBA it's really tough to go back to back because of all these strong teams, but they definitely put themselves in a position to do it.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more there. They did, and obviously, I don't know if you mentioned, but Anthony Davis signed the max extension, playing with all of us, acting like he might. Yeah. Let's be real, Anthony Davis wasn't fooling anybody.
He fooled me.
He fooled you? You did not think Anthony Davis was going to sign that max extension? I mean, well, it's not really Lakers. You know, you kind of like the moves they made. Dennis Schroeder, I think, is going to be I mean, he said he wants to start at point guard for him. I don't know if that's the route they're going to go. I think they don't really have that depth at point. They don't really have the depth to put Schroeder in the starting lineup, because then what do you do on the bench? Yeah, point guard LeBron James is not, even though LeBron James continues to defy father time with being as good as he was 10 years ago. But he can't play 48 minutes a game now, and he won't. Going forward. Just quickly, we kind of made fun of it, but quickly going on our J.R. Smith. Just a funny article that I ran across quick. So when the NBA announced last week that they were not going to test for marijuana, J.R. Smith instantly started trending. When they said they weren't going to test for marijuana anymore, J.R. Smith started trending on social media. So I just found that a little humorous. But going forward, the Lakers are going to be a champion. They're going to be in contention for a championship. Wouldn't shock me if they went back to back, but then again, so many teams. I think it's far from a lock, even with LeBron James and Anthony Davis. They're going to be either the number 1 or number 2 seed in the Western Conference next season. Even with them basically, and the thing is, they're so good, they can coast. And that's probably what they're going to do. They're going to coast and still be the number 1 or number 2 seed in the Western Conference. Mm-hmm. They're just that team. They're just that good with Anthony Davis and LeBron. So there's not much else. They're going to be a championship contender next season, and they could very well go back to back. Now I think going forward, I wanna see LeBron go up against Golden State again. I think that would be a very fun storyline, I think, going at that how it played out. But Yeah, championship contenders next season. They could win it all. So that's pretty much they're very elite but unexciting.
Yeah,
So
I think that's pretty accurate. All right, I mean, to wrap it up then, I know an episode that I would like to do before the season starts, and I kind of alluded to it a little bit earlier, but I
Marcus
want to.
Howard, wow, how grateful we are Marcus Howard made it into the NBA.
I mean, not yet, but hopefully. But
He technically is.
yeah, I mean, I guess if you want to get technical, I still don't count it quite yet, but yeah, he's got to make the roster. But the I really want to go through and do our standings predictions at some point because that's just kind of the point I want to wrap up on is I think that I mentioned already there's just so much parity in today's NBA. I mean, even you could say, okay, the Lakers are going to be the number 1 seed, but am I going to sit here and say the Lakers will absolutely represent the Western Conference and will absolutely go back to back? Definitely not. I just don't think anything's guaranteed. I mean, we saw them with signs of weakness here and there. They were overall able to hold strong, but I think there's a lot of competitive teams in the NBA, and the Western Conference is no exception, even when we're talking about some of the bottom teams. I mean, if you ask me to say who the worst team in the Western Conference is right now, well, I'm going to take the Thunder out of the equation because they just look terrible right now. But besides that, I could make a case for every team making the playoffs, honestly. And I know the Timberwolves, it's not likely, but I
I
mean, they have.
I personally don't see a Timberwolves situation. Or I would say Sacramento. Even though they finished, I couldn't see a Sacramento situation where they made the playoffs.
I mean, they were pretty competitive. I don't know. That's why it's tough, though. You can rule them out, but if De'Aaron Fox keeps ascending, Bagley's back healthy, they have their 2 centers, Buddy Hield's anything, and Halliburton. I mean, I don't know. It's intriguing, at least.
Mm-hmm.
Not that I'd say they're going to make it, but I don't think it's easy to say that they're going to be, a bottom of the barrel nothing team either.
No.
So, anything else you want to say?
Not much. I was just curious to see if you had any. I know I did the Nuggets and Clippers without you. I wonder if you had any overall notes. I obviously I went over them in the moves they made, but it's why quick if you have any quick thoughts on either of those two teams.
Yeah, I mean, the Clippers, we have to see. I mean, Paul George surprisingly is going to be there long
Yep.
term. I didn't think that was going to happen. That was a little surprising to me because I'm not a big believer in the Paul George and Kawhi combo,
Yep.
but obviously they are. So, I'm sure you already said that, but
Yep.
but I mean, they're in a similar situation to what the Lakers did this offseason, I think, where they lost pieces, but really they replenished it. I mean, they lost Montrezl Harrell, but they got Serge Ibaka. So, I don't think they really got much worse. I think that, I mean, they should have been in the Western Conference Finals last season. So, I mean, this is a team that's just got to put it together and take that next step forward. I mean, overall, their first season as a whole unit, they had a really nice year. So I think it's just putting it all together. I mean, they're definitely going to be in contention. So I don't really think they got much better or worse, in my opinion.
Mhm.
And then Denver. I mean, obviously, you talked about Marcus Howard, but
I did
um,
not mention
you
Marcus.
didn't. Oh my
I
gosh!
was
I
waiting.
mean,
I was waiting and hoping that you were gonna come back on, and if you didn't come back on, I was gonna make him my final note before I signed off. But you got back on, so it's a good thing that you
all
get.
is right in the world now. I don't. The Nuggets are tough for me. I mean, a lot of that. I mean, they lost Jeremy Grant, which I don't love them losing him, but I don't think they should have signed him to a $20 million a year deal. I think a lot of them taking the next step forward is going to depend on Jamal Murray and Michael Porter's development as a
Yeah.
duo. I mean, we know what Jokic is at this point. And I mean, I'll even throw Bol in that mix. I mean, if he can ever develop into something bigger, but primarily, I think if Porter and Jamal Murray develop into all-star players, this is a team that can win a championship. I'm not saying next year, but they have a core that has a lot of potential. So I think that's what a lot of their season hinges on. Because realistically, Michael Porter's just going to slide into the starting spot where Jeremy Grant was. So It's not the.
Porter has been saying this all season that he wants to be, and he was saying as the season ended in the playoff, as their playoff run ended, he wants to be the third option. He said that several, and we mention this all the time when you talk about Michael Porter. If he didn't get hurt, he was in contention to be the number one pick. That's and when his draft, but obviously the injuries, he slid a little bit. But I don't think people remember of how the potential that Michael Porter has. Like, I definitely think Michael Porter has third star on a championship contender team potential, and I think
he does
it's up to the Denver coaching staff and Michael Porter himself to see if they can realize that this season.
Yep, I would definitely agree with that. So I think that's all we have for this episode. We appreciate you guys listening or watching. Season is right around the corner, so make sure you guys tune in, start some conversation, NBA conversation in the hot spot as the fantasy football season ends here. We'll have to fill it with some NBA and MLB talk soon, so keep the conversation going there, and we'll see you guys next time.
Yep.